Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. It is Friday. It is February the 14th, and a happy Valentine's Day to you if you're into that sort of Hallmark holiday. My children are absolutely thrilled that there is another holiday. My daughters were telling me it's really difficult to be at the beginning of the year because there's President's Day, and then there's Martin Luther King Day, and then there's Valentine's Day, and there's so many different holidays to get excited about. I guess to be a 7-year-old girl sounds like it's a pretty good gig at this point. I'm just kind of laughing. She came down this morning at like 6 o'clock and she was getting things ready. We're going to be talking about making discrimination great again. We are a discriminating people. You are supposed to be a discriminating person. You have every right to discriminate, and you should. And that word has been taken from us. That's my contention. I'm going to be bringing on Steve Friend. We're going to be talking a little bit about doing some discrimination as you consider the sources of information. And a little bit later on, we'll bring on a friend from Red State in the person of Susie Moore. So we're going to do a double guest today. But discrimination is not a bad thing, and nor should it be considered a bad thing. So we're going to talk about making discrimination great again. In addition to that, we'll talk about RFK. We got some clips of stuff going on over in Europe. Pete Hegseth is running around in the snow in short shorts. Good for him. It is very, very appalling that he would go out there and try to do physical fitness. There's a lot of things that are upsetting to people today. So we're going to get into all those things, like I said, with my buddy Steve Friend in just one moment. Before we do, let's say thanks to the folks at Patriot Coolers. Talk about discrimination. You can only really choose one thing to drink out of at a time. Actually, you probably could have more than one. Like I have more than one on the screen. But if you were going to choose one, I would choose Patriot Coolers because they are the company that makes the best looking. They have the same price as everyone else. Their performance is superior. Their design is superior. And they're things that I've been using for, at this point, we're coming up on about like 8 years, something like that. Close to 8 years, 7.5 years. PatriotCoolers.com is the website. Promo code KYLE. If you're going to buy a tumbler, you can use their promo code. I think it's Valentine's 50. You'll get a buy one, get one 50% off. And so that's a deal. But if you're looking for anything else on the website, make sure you use my promo code KYLE. They didn't give me a Valentine's one. Talk about discriminating. Jeez Louise, these guys at Patriot Coolers. The link is in the show description. If you want to get to the Kyle Seraphin Show collection, you'll get things like this one that's up on the wall. Yes, that is one of our 30 ounces. It's got the American flag on there. It's set up the way the suspendables do, which means we're flying it upside down with the suspendables badge on it. You can check all those things out over at patriotcoolers.com. You may want to get yourself a long-term option as you're coming into RV season in the spring. If you're going to be kayaking or doing other things like that, they've got soft coolers, hard coolers, and so on. PatriotCoolers.com. We're going to dive into the excitement right now and talk about discriminating. So Valentine's Day falls on a Friday, and that means we can bring on the one and only Steve Friend. Good morning, Mr. Friend. How is your Friday going?
Oh, it's outstanding, man. I am here for Valentine's Day. See, in our house, I'm married to a woman from the Ukraine, and they celebrate Women's Day, International Women's Day, which is March 8th, which was supposed to be a communist holiday, but they just co-opted it and said, buy us flowers and chocolates because we want another occasion. And I was reliably informed before I was betrothed that we didn't have to celebrate Valentine's Day. And I could celebrate March 8th instead, which was good because I could save money on flowers. And then I made that rookie mistake once. And now I make sure that I buy flowers both on February 14th and March 8th.
I told my wife I don't like buying flowers because I think that they're wasteful. And I think that they can't be used in they can't be used for very many purposes. There's not a lot of functionality to a flower, and it doesn't really jive with my sensibilities. But what I am willing to buy is a mill that will create unlimited flour for however much it costs, so we can mill our own flour at home. It's not the same thing. I think I'll probably have to take my girls to the store later on today and find
Make
things.
Make sure that you get the sweet hearts, the hearts that say "Be mine." Are they still in
We
production?
don't do that in our house. We've started eliminating all the dyes, and that's part of the game. If you're going to do your own grain
Trad
mill,
wife and Maha. Congratulations.
Yeah, we're fully radicalized. I saw a video the other day. Actually, this guy he was like, did your wife tell you that she wants to start making sourdough? Congratulations, you're a farmer. Because the next thing is you're going to have to go down to Lowe's and get yourself some wood and build yourself a chicken coop because they're coming probably in the spring. So you might as well get yourself prepped for that. And you might as well start making room for like goats and other sort of farm animals, because once you start down the sourdough route, the end result is you have to live on a homesteading compound.
Once you start using the term homestead as opposed to house, that's when the space station is fully weaponized.
Yeah, it's fully operational, right? Okay, so I had a couple of videos that triggered my mind this morning. I don't necessarily want to do all current events. RFK was sworn in yesterday. Cash made it out of committee. Was there anything else really big that happened that you saw?
No, the Cash one was the big one that I was anticipating. But otherwise, I think we're heading into maybe the first quiet weekend for the Trump administration. But we have the Daytona 500, so you never know. I'm half expecting to see Air Force One fly in.
It's possible, right? I mean, that would make sense.
He's been there once, and I mean, you're talking. There's 250,000 people that are there when not Donald Trump is present. So we'll see.
So that sets up two things. Number one, we're going to talk discrimination because it's a cultural thing. I think it's important, and I think that people on the political left, as they've gone after the language, and they've done it with a lot of things. Discrimination is one of the words that was taken from us, and I'm going to start claiming it back starting today. You and I are going to do that together. The other thing is Donald Trump may show up in Daytona. Would you agree? That
1,000% possible.
And you will know that he showed up there because, one, he will probably say it before he goes, but he will also just show up and people will be able to see him. He's not being hidden and shrouded. It's not like the same thing that we saw for the last 4 years. Do you realize how weird it has been that every single appearance of the president of the United States for the past 4 years has been set up, it has been curated, and it has been sort of packaged for the American people in multiple takes so that it can be presented this staged person that is not real.
Sort of ham-handedly. It was not like a very smooth operation. It wasn't like the movie Dave where no one could tell that wasn't actually the president. And he was sitting there having meatball subs with his accountant figuring out how to balance the budget. And all the cabinet was like, oh, that makes sense. We'll go along with it. I mean, everybody who paid attention for 15 seconds knew that Joe Biden was not in control. He was a marionette puppet.
Right. And I saw a little clip from Dave the other day that was popped up on social media, and it was like running around, and it was like that was the precursors to DOGE, and it was in 93 when they made the movie. DOGE, I mean, the concept of cutting crap out of the government has been around for my entire life, and no one's ever actually done it, which is the most probably amazing piece of it. It's the reason why people have lost their minds. I saw this video. This man actually nails it pretty clearly. Like most of the time you see the TikToks and I'm like, I don't really care what you have to say because what do you know? But this guy kind of looks like if I let myself go a little bit with the hair.
Not carnivore. Long. Kyle Seraphin. Got it.
No. He's not fat. He's just kind of like sloppy. He looks like he could be like a Fed on surveillance. I've worked with guys that look like this, but no, he's making a really interesting point about the accessibility and the massive change that we saw happen basically on January 20th, first thing with the sitting down and signing of the executive orders at the desk. I haven't seen a press conference in the White House in 4 years. It just didn't happen.
No, they put out Karine Jean-Pierre with her giant binder of answers that she could possibly pull from, or in the rare occasion that Joe Biden stood up there, he would pull out the chart out of his pocket with the predetermined questions from the predetermined reporters.
Right, with the faces of the people he was going to talk to. Meanwhile, this guy kind of nails it. So let's just take it to a TikTok guy.
I love living in a country where you can wake up every day and say, I wonder what the president's up to today. And you can just find it out. You just figure it out. It's online at basically just whatever he's doing. He's signing executive orders. Oh, it's being live streamed. He's visiting families that fell victim to a hurricane. Oh, it's on Fox News right now. He's doing a private dinner. Oh, well, they're live streaming that too. I wonder what his policy changes are. Oh, well, he was watching the Super Bowl and just decided to get rid of the penny, and he tweeted about it to let everyone know. This is the most American thing I've ever seen.
He's not wrong. It's very American to be able to have this sort of transparency. Remember, we were being promised that it would be the most transparent presidency in history, Joe Biden's, and it was the exact opposite. It never materialized.
Well, I mean, there was never, ever going to be an opportunity for Joe Biden to be transparent just facially because he was never in control. And now what you have is it's sort of unique because of the technology we have, where we have instant access. We're hundreds of years beyond when we had these legendary presidents who would be writing with their quill, and it would take weeks and possibly months to find out what sort of actions they had. I mean, now it's within seconds. As soon as Donald Trump does something, if it's put on to X or to Truth Social, then we all have access to it, which is a unique experience that we have. But it's also fundamentally American. They're very responsive to the people. I mean, how long have people been saying, hey, it costs us 3 cents to make 1 penny. That's kind of dumb. We shouldn't do that. And he's just kind of like, oh, yeah, I'll get that done for you right now. Pretty cool.
Right, and it doesn't mean that you can't spend in 1 cent, but most people are spending things in digital currency anyway. They're doing it on a financial ledger that's just moving back and forth between computers. So why have the physical penny anymore, especially when they're useless, they have no intrinsic value? You know, it all makes sense to me.
There's that Elon video of him being interviewed by somebody when I forget what the suggestion that the interviewer said was, why don't you put whatever this is in the boosters on top of the rocket? And Elon goes, yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, that makes sense. And then they flash forward like 6 months later, and he's like, hey, thanks, that was a great idea. We implemented it.
Yeah, 6 months later. Well, because that's how minds work that are interested in solving problems versus people that are interested in the status quo. Donald Trump is talking about ending the war in Ukraine.
Which one?
Yeah,
okay.
So exactly. And that's very, very offensive. And so they're upset about it. So again, one of these like press conferences from his desk. Like, can you imagine that if you were just sat down, you're like, I think I'm going to do some work today. I'm going to sit down. Like, go ahead and let all the people that are outside in so they can watch me do my job. And then I'll just answer questions. And he's just up here and he's like, yeah, signing some things, talking to some people. Yeah, last night we were doing this. And so here's what we've come up with this morning. And then people are like, excuse me, sir, come here. So there's some pretty funny moments, including a brilliant shutdown of CNN. But let me throw some clips up. We'll just catch up on what the president's been up to. Like I said, it's refreshing for the first time in 4 years to be able to at least have that access. Here he is talking about shutting down the war and also stabbing CNN and making fun of them for being friends with Joe Biden, which is also pretty hilarious.
And this should have been done by Biden years ago. This should have never been allowed to happen. I know he's a friend of yours.
But couldn't Putin just withdraw his...
He's a friend of
today?
CNN. That's why nobody watches CNN anymore, because they have no credibility. Okay, who else? Yes, please.
He's just yucking it up. He's like, I'm just going to take a stab at CNN for no reason because they're in there. And so that wasn't the only one he did. He actually shuts down Caitlin Collins, who, was on the debate or was on a stage with him doing a town hall and was pretty awful. So have you seen this clip yet or no?
I haven't seen the Caitlin Collins one, but I really just,
okay.
He used to do that in the first administration when he kind of had lost his mojo. He would just come in and be like, I need to do a press conference and tee it high and let it fly.
Yeah, he would slam Jim Acosta. He would just like make him feel bad about his life. He just does it
That's
to Caitlin Collins.
Life force. It's like the liberal tears that just give him immortality.
Okay, and listen, I highly respect that need to just like poke somebody else and take their energy sometimes. When we used to do stuff in the military when we were training, I would just look and see who looked like they were suffering the most, and then I would just feed off my amusement that they looked like they were in way more pain than me. I did the same thing at the FBI Academy. They do the knuckle push-ups, and everybody acts like it's going to be like the kryptonite for every human being. So we're just posted up on knuckles on some concrete, and we've got this guy who is tiny. I can't remember his name, but we had a couple of like really, really small, like horse jockey size DT instructors.
I resemble those remarks.
Yeah. No, they were like smaller than you, Steve, like quite a bit. Your build, but like scaled down by 4 or 5 inches shorter. And so they're just locked out on their knuckles there, and they don't weigh anything. They probably weigh like $115. And whatever, I'll hold knuckle push-ups. So I'm holding the plank and I'm looking over, and I heard a sound that I was not familiar with before in my life while doing difficult things. And it was the sound of people suffering out loud, which is bizarre. And so they're like, and they're just locking out a push-up. They're not even doing anything. They're just laying there. And it was like women and like they were men. Shocking to me. This is another reason why the FBI is not elite. And so I'm just seeing this thing, and I was like, I could do this for 1,000 years right now. As long as there's people crying around me that don't want to be doing it, I want to be doing it longer. Anyway, Trump is doing a thing that he does where he'll like sign something, and then he like shows everybody, he's like, look what I've done. Look at this thing. I've done this thing. It's so good. It's the best thing I've done today in the next 15 minutes. So he's holding up his executive order, and Caitlin Collins decides that there's a lull. So she's going to butt in and get a question, and he stomps on her soul for just a minute, and we're all going to enjoy it together. Here we go.
Mr. President, you won the White House in part because of high inflation. If your tariffs make prices go up...
Excuse me, we haven't asked you to speak yet, please. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
You won the White House in part.
Go ahead, please. Mr. President, you are making time.
He just shuts her down, and then he picks the guy next to her just to make her feel worse. Excuse me, we haven't called on you yet.
And he's doing that for those listening and not watching with a map of the Gulf of America behind him.
Yeah.
Where they put the font at like 48.
Yeah, no, it's too big. And the whole thing was they were like, isn't it dangerous to compel the speech of the Associated Press? And they're just like, okay, some of this reminds me, we're going to touch back on this in a minute, but the discrimination, the need for discrimination. You can't allow everybody to do everything all the time, and you cannot act like all ideas are equally good. Nobody can live that way. So if you don't want the AP in there, sorry, AP. You're being discriminated against because you suck.
I discriminate against bad things all the time. Like if you're a doctor who sucks and is going to treat my cancer with essential oils, then I'm going to discriminate and going to go against it, find somebody else who's going to give me the chemo.
So the problem is the definition of discrimination has changed pretty dramatically. Everybody acts like discrimination is the cardinal sin. Nobody wants to be called a bigot. Nobody wants to be called prejudiced, although we're all prejudiced against certain things. And so I had these reflections, and I'm going to show you the reason why this came to my mind, because there's a woman in Fairfax County, Virginia, my old haunts, and she's at a school board meeting talking about some things that are really reasonable. And then she does this thing that women do. It is a feminine instinct to ameliorate those around you by saying, this is not the bad word. And yet, you have to convince me that it's a bad word. You haven't even made the argument that discrimination is wrong. And so I think it isn't wrong. Here's Donald Trump talking about crushing Canada. He's going to discriminate on behalf of Americans, which is kind of like the job of the president. You're supposed to not be, you're not the president of Canada. We don't care. Also, he calls Justin Trudeau Governor Trudeau, which is a thing to listen for. He slips this stuff in. It's very, very quick. So this is like a 6-minute long clip. I'm only going to play like probably 90 seconds of it or so, but more from the press conference of him just hurting the feelings of Europeans and Canadians alike, because you can discriminate when you're the president of the United States.
We think the European Union is wonderful. We all love Europe, love the countries in Europe, but European Union has been absolutely brutal on trade. Canada has been very bad to us on trade, but now Canada is going to have to start paying up. And Canada has been tough on the military because they have a very low military cost. They think we're going to protect them with our military, which is unfair. So Canada is going to be a very interesting situation because, we just don't need their product. And yet they survive off the fact that we do 95% of what they do. And Canada is just absolutely, I say it, and sometimes people smile and sometimes they say great idea, but Canada, their taxes would come down greatly, their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada, and really Canada in this particular, why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
Mr. President, how are things going with Canada? There was obviously a delay in implementing those tariffs.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens.
I just had to leave it just long enough to get there.
You want to talk about having some serendipity or providential occurrence happen as I'm listening to that clip? Because the Daytona 500 is this weekend, the Thunderbirds are in town and they are actually actively flying practice. The Thunderbirds flew over my house as Donald Trump called Justin Trudeau governor.
What's more American than that? The Snow Mexicans don't have a lot of bargaining chips. People have been calling them the Serapians, which I also like. The Maple Serapians.
It's a little bit softer. I mean, they do say please and thank you, and even when you say the horrible things, they apologize.
Yeah, no, they're polite people, and I think that somebody said that they were going to induct them. We're going to change the name from Canada to Gay North Dakota or something like that, and it's possible. Look, I think mostly rural Canadians align with us, and urban Canadians align with urban Americans who have terrible ideas. But it is fun to watch him just troll these people, and he's not done with the trolling. I'm telling you, he's sitting at his desk doing his job. Again, it's hard for people to fathom. Your job is to sit here and do some things, and then you just invite a studio audience And then as you do your job, you're also doing a little bit of stand-up comedy and like poking and hurting feelings. Here he is punching at Elizabeth Warren. They're asking about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which they froze. And so this was the other day that people were going out and losing their ever-loving minds about it. And I've got some more clips for that in a second. So here's, he just decides to do an aside attacking Elizabeth Warren, which I'm here for because I can't stand her voice. I think Elizabeth Warren's voice is the worst thing in politics. Your reaction to that?
She represents the worst class of people in politics, so ergo it makes sense. She's the liberal white woman from the suburbs with the coexist bumper sticker on her Subaru who will cut off her child's genitals so that she can impress her friends during mimosas at Sunday brunch.
She represents a masculine version of Merrick Garland. It's the same energy. It's just like more balls. Okay, anyway, here's Trump making fun of it.
Mr. President, regarding the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren, have said that by freezing it, it's giving big banks and giant corporations the green light to scam families.
Pocahontas is the faker. That was set up to destroy people. She used that as her little personal agency to go around and destroy people. And she's a fake. Just like she said she was an Indian, and she wasn't an Indian. You have more Indian blood in you than she has. She went to college based on the fact that she was an Indian. She got jobs based on the fact that she was an Indian. She's a fake. That was set up to destroy some very good people. And it worked. I mean, it worked. A lot of...
He's just riffing. He has no answer to why we should keep it, why we shouldn't. He thinks it's bad, so he just shut it down.
His office environment is as if he's a stand-up comedian being heckled. He has to set up crowd work. Hey, why don't I come to your workplace and heckle you while you're working, right? That's the dynamic. And side note, the CFPB gets all of its funding from the Federal Reserve, not the Treasury. And the Federal Reserve has not turned a profit in multiple years, so there's no funding for it, so we should just shut it off anyway.
Yeah, it's costing us money. It's funny.
They call that an asset, by the way. The fact that they are spending money on the CFPB that they hope to get reimbursed, that's an asset. That's the way the government operates.
Yeah, the government's assets and liabilities balance sheets are the most confusing thing. That we're like, you have to basically reinvent accounting to be able to be fluent in what they do. It's a lot like looking at, if you've ever been around electricians versus electrical engineers. Have you ever seen this experience? Probably not.
The electrician seems like they would be doing some PhD level work, and the electrician would just be like, get my lights on.
The electrician deals with things and the route of current, okay, which is very specific. It's kind of like water flow. So as things go towards them, then that's the thing that they're functioning on. An electrical engineer, I'm going back like 25 years now to dig into my college days to remember if this is true, but I believe this is the way that I remember why I had to leave engineering school. Because I went to an EE class, an electrical engineering class, and they were tracking electron flow, which works the opposite way of the flow of current. And I was like, I've actually wired things up, and that's not how things work in real life. Like that may be the way that they theoretically operate, and it may be the way that that things happen at the level of physics of like particle physics. But nobody can think about it in that way unless you're a crazy person, and all you do is things backwards that don't have to. Like if you're only interested in design, and it still works.
Elizabeth Warren talking about modern monetary theory. We could just print money forever.
Right. Theoretically, yes. Reality actually sits in, and so then literally you cannot do that, as you were telling me. Tell the people about your boys, and then I'm going to go and we're going to pivot away from this, and we'll go into like some of the discriminatory practice.
Well, as a best-selling author, I have taken it upon myself to become a pedantic jerk when it comes to the misuse of the term literally. Because if it's not written down in literature, literally is an inappropriate moniker to put on it. And I've coached my boys so that now, since the word literally is so misused by adults, they interrupt very rudely and appropriately when they hear a stranger say the word literally and say, literally? Is it written down in literature? So props to Dad. I'm very proud when it happens.
Steve Friend may be a jerk, but he's right. And we're going to go ahead and pivot to a sponsor here so we can say thanks to the folks that keep the lights on over here. It's patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Folks, You have to understand or ask yourself the question about what your safety is worth. Right now, there are scammers half the world away. They are crouching over dirty computer screens. I don't know why that has to be dirty, but they probably are. Using Google to try to find your information. They're scanning the web, trying to figure out where you live. They want to know where you work. They want to know your phone number. They want to know the names of your family members. And they do this to get the personal information to scam you. And a lot of the stuff is in full view on public databases. You and your family will be exposed to the prying eyes of people that want to get what you have, which means you might need some digital camouflage. Patriot Protect removes your personal data from the internet. It wipes it from Google and other sites where the scammers and the cyber criminals can find it. You didn't agree to share this info, most likely. Now you can take it back and you can keep your privacy, you can keep it secure, and you can stay protected. Patriot Protect deletes all of your personal information from Google. Their technology scans and scrubs over 100 personal search databases. I got a little update from mine. They said they got it off 150. There are these sites that scammers and criminals are using to find you. They are casing you digitally, and once it's completed, you'll find that Patriot Protect will continuously monitor to make sure that every new instance of your personal data is eliminated from online. It is 24/7 protection for about $5 a month. You can get an annual subscription using my promo code. Again, it is the promo code is Kyle. It's at patriot-protect.com/Kyle to get yourself set up. And we recommend that you get something. If you're not doing it, find another service that does it. But that's the one that we're using here in the Seraphin household. I hate scammers, dude. I hate people just calling me randomly. I get it that it has to happen. It happens way, way less now, which is actually pretty good. It's an indication, especially when you're like a guy who has a social media account the way that you and I do. People just want to call you up and bother you.
I always liked getting the scam calls on my government phone, purporting to be from the FBI.
I would spend a lot of time on my government phone scam calls. That was actually something I enjoyed doing, especially if I was on surveillance and I needed the entertainment. I figured if I was tying up a scammer, then they weren't scamming somebody's grandma. So I would just be like, okay, I'm driving to my bank is Wells Fargo. Is that where I need to go? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll be like, okay. And they're like, how long it take you to get there? And I'm like, dude, it'll take me like 8 minutes. And I put them on hold and I just put it down, set my watch for about 8 minutes, pick it up later. I'm like, okay, I'm walking into the bank. What am I looking for here? And they're like, you have to go to the teller. And then I'd like have like a fake conversation. Hold on a second. And I'd cover it. Like, I'd just do the full thing. I would imitate a scammer because it was fun.
That's what they you're right. I mean, the moment that they are with you is one that they're not taking advantage of somebody. And there's never any justice with those. It's like, well, that's on the Ivory Coast. We can't do anything about that. We are the premier law enforcement agency, but we only want to go after people who are on a guided tour of the Capitol.
It's true. It is true. That's what they did. There's an opportunity cost. Okay, so let's do opportunity cost. This is kind of fun. You ready? This is MSNBC covering one of the most noteworthy things that's happened in quite a while, several years, I would think. RFK Jr. was confirmed. He made it through despite all of the contentious sort of debate and all the talk and slandering. And he was also really censored, which is quite interesting. Like, he was dramatically censored by the mainstream media. They didn't want to hear what he had to say, so he was dangerous. He got sworn in, and there was a press conference, just like Donald Trump did, sitting at his desk. He's talking to RFK. He's talking to the American people. RFK said his own things. This is the news coverage. News. I'm going to put that in air quotes because this, I don't know what this is. Entertainment, propaganda. MSNBC broke away from the words of the president and the newly sworn in HHS secretary that they were actually thinking was coverage to talk to some random doctor that no one's ever heard of. Watch this.
Donald Trump is now speaking at the lectern before RFK Jr. will be sworn in. When we come out of this, we're going to talk to a practicing physician and expert in health systems management. That person's going to give us everything about what it would mean, would the purview and the remit for RFK Jr. So let's listen to this, and then we'll come out. We're not going to listen to this. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We're going to watch this for now. Joining us, practicing physician and expert in health systems management and hospital revenue cycles, Dr. Drew Updike. All right, so we are going to watch as RFK Jr. Gets sworn in.
What is that doctor thinking? What is Drew Updike thinking when they cut to him and he's like,
he's thinking that you got me up at an ungodly hour and maybe sit in this chair to watch your garbage program for 38 minutes waiting for my moment, and I have no background, no lighting, amateur hour, and now when I have my moment, you're going to make me talk over an image of people that are more prominent, more popular, and everybody else is more interested in than me. Thank you very much, MSNBC.
What a weird moment. Like, I wonder what was chirping in her ear. She's like, we're going to cut to this thing that you're showing on the screen. She obviously knows that there's some kind of a video or there's some kind of a presentation happening. She probably thought she was going to get a coffee break so she could go and take a sip. And then they're like, yeah, no. Like, we don't like what they're saying. Do you want to know what they were saying?
Probably, thank you very much for this opportunity to make America healthy again.
Indeed, something very similar. In fact, it was actually pretty heartfelt. So here is RFK Jr. saying the things that you can't say on MSNBC, apparently. They are discriminating, it turns out.
For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country. On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump. All right. And he gave me... He's now given me, he's kept every promise that he's made to me. He's kept his word in every account and gone way beyond it. I'm so grateful to you, Mr. President. A lot of people told me that I couldn't trust President Trump. I better get it in writing. And we did a handshake, and everything that he told me he was going to do, he has done. Right. And I'm so grateful to him, and I've told you before, I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure, and you are going to transform this country.
What is your reaction to that? How dangerous is what he just said?
I think it's a disruption to what the normal buckets of personnel are in the federal government. And Garrett and I have talked about this. And he represents the people who are genuine, or he's at least articulating that he represents the people who are genuinely feel blessed for the opportunity to do the job. Not just do the job because it's a job. Not just do the job because it's a quid pro quo and I can advance myself. Not do the job and resent doing the job, but actually genuinely wake up every day, go to work and say, I can't believe I have this opportunity. This is my hobby. This is all I've ever wanted to do. And I take him at his face on this one. Like, I don't agree with RFK on most issues, but on this one here, I think he's really well siloed in that area. And I think that it's going to be a good, objectively good thing for the country to have him at the helm at HHS.
So I've got my phone sitting in one of these silent pouches so that it's turned off during the show, because otherwise it just buzzes and drives me nuts. But I have a new thing that I've started doing. It's my new form of entertainment. In addition to doing Twitter, which is always fun, but I don't like notifications on. I've turned notifications, Steve Friend, to Reddit. And there is an entire federal employment, like, I don't know what they call them, silo, thread thing. And there are nonstop posts of people that are getting fired and mass layoffs happening at various different agencies. And I die laughing. And I have like an anonymous posting name, which is like, I think it's like Angry Parsnip 24. It's just randomly assigned. It's like a thing and a thing and a thing. And they give you a number and a thing. So Parsnip is what always gets assigned to me. If you guys find me out there, that's what I am. I don't know what the number is either. It's like 360 or 24 or something. But it says, and I'm like, you should take the fork. I'm like, if you're thinking that you're like, you might be laid off next, you better make the good decision. I just troll federal employees for fun, which is probably a little bit sick, but that is, that won't surprise anybody that listens to this program. It makes me so happy to get it. And there were 4 this morning before I even got going of like people that are panicking that their federal agencies are going to be shut down.
This fires you up like the elves doing knuckle plank holds, right? It just gets you so excited knowing that the people...
I'm telling you, it's a digital version of partaking in other suffering and like getting strong from it. Because like, look, we've already done that. We've already been removed from our job, and it was pretty unfair when it happened. So you're going to be hard for us to find a lot of sympathy from me. Also, these are not agencies that are doing good things. If my friends lost jobs that were doing good work, most of them wouldn't care because they'd go do other good work. It turns out. That's really common.
The overwhelming number of people are doing or have a job that is not worth having. The work that theoretically they're supposed to be doing is not worth funding to be done because we don't want it done. We don't need it done. It's nothing more than a jobs program for you. And then you have the hubris to have this sense of entitlement of, well, I'm entitled to this job.
It's
that
my job.
Nobody thinks I should have.
How dare you? And you know what? That is kind of the attitude that Chuck Schumer's been taking. So let me just cut to a cartoon, which is a spoof of the way that Chuck Schumer actually talks. And it sounds remarkably similar to actual Chuck Schumer, except it's less old. And there's the reader glasses are less offensive in the cartoon version. But listen, if you want to clean up government, you are a threat to democracy, apparently.
Elon Musk is a threat to our democracy. Allowing him to uncover fraud in the misappropriation of taxpayer dollars is somehow a constitutional crisis. Let me remind you all what you'll be losing if Elon Musk is not stopped. Americans will not benefit from the $2 million spent on a pancake eating contest in Mongolia. They will not benefit from the $4 million to fund a tampon throwing contest in Dubai. They will not benefit from the $8 million to produce Pimp My Ride in Zimbabwe. Hello? We got it. Got what? Evidence that USAID is actually really beneficial to the American people. Okay, I'll be right there. It came in 10 minutes ago. I'm sure this will make Americans really supportive of USAID. Elmo wants to jihad. Elmo wants women to not show their ankles. Elmo wants to teach your son how to throw a stone really hard. This is exactly what the American people will lose if we don't stop Elon Musk. I agree. Look at this. On the left is one of Musk's cronies. He goes by the alias Big Balls. I suspect it's a nickname he gave himself so people think he's packing, but by the looks of it, I'd say his balls aren't really that big. He recently recommended cutting $16 million funding an Afghanistan version of Karate Kid, which makes him the biggest threat to our democracy today.
Like how everything about these lampoons are they're too close to reality.
It is Babylon B level. I mean, it is prophecy rather than parody at this point.
Yeah.
They caught a bleeder, man. The DOGE, I've been saying, you throw the rock into the pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one that you hit, and the dog they hit is a bleeder. This is like you with the Catholic memo. Say his name, Kyle Seraphin.
Listen, sometimes, we called it the thermal exhaust port because we just watched like the explosion bring on secondary and follow-on explosions after explosions, and this one just keeps feeding into it. Here's Schellenberger, who went in front of a congressional committee in the last couple of days, spoke in front of Tom Massey, and they're talking about yet another USAID thing that probably a lot of people don't realize. And I haven't personally fact-checked this, but Schellenberger's pretty... like, he's almost autistic with the way he follows this stuff down. Like, he's neurotically focused on fact pattern, and I haven't found him to be disingenuous yet. So and the fact that Tom Massey is behind it and agreeing with it makes me also feel pretty good, because Tom Massey, he's one of those people that understands electron flow and has that sort of sense of
he can also wire the house too, like
right. He can also wire the house because he's theoretical and he's practical. So anyway, here's Tom Massey asking questions of Schellenberger about a USAID thing that you guys might be a little bit concerned about.
Mr. Schellenberger, can you explain how you traced USAID funding that served as the basis for whistleblower report in 2019, which led to the impeachment of President Trump?
Sure. Well, you may remember that the so-called whistleblowers in the White House was actually a CIA analyst. And in that whistleblower's complaint, which led to the impeachment, one of the central pieces of evidence was created by a USAID funded and controlled organization called the OCCRP. And we have another piece out today about how it participated in the Russiagate hoax as well, creating essentially very important information leading to that. So, I mean, you have in USAID a much larger fund of money and a much broader strategy for information control that included censorship, but also, as I mentioned, taking control of investigative journalism really worldwide. I mean, its ambitions were, amazing. So, yeah, I mean, that's an agency when we saw that get shut down by DOGE, I thought that was completely appropriate. If there's something in there that it was doing that's valuable, then you could refund it later. But my view, same thing with CISA, death penalty for organizations that participated in violations of the First Amendment like CISA. Cybersecurity is an extremely important function. It shouldn't be contaminated and undermined by censorship activities.
That seems like really straightforward.
This is so much worse even than the egregious offense that we had to begin with. The circular reporting that went on between the government agencies and the media to begin with. We thought that it was, well, they just all wanted the same outcome. They all hated Donald Trump, right? So that you'd have these leaks from the government agencies to the media, and then the government agencies would take the media reports and bolster their cases and say, see, it's been reported in the media. Well, now we're finding out that not only did they leak, they paid money to these media institutions on top of that. So we've now compounded it going forward. And I agree with Schellenberger. These are death penalty for these institutions for having participated in it.
Yes, not for the people, but for the institutions themselves. Here's RFK Jr. committing the cardinal sin. This is why you have to cut away from him from live TV, because God forbid he do something like this, like he did on CNN, where he actually outed, he says like the accurate part, which is censorship worthy.
But do you really believe that when people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA.
Can you fact check that for me?
I think that accurate, because there was something called Operation Bronze Griffin, which I saw from the FBI, where they would get access to people's private messages, which we were reliably informed by Mark Zuckerberg were secure, and they would just be given back to us, the FBI. Bronze Griffin reporting, it was just a confidential human source, and we didn't need a warrant for it. And then once we had that, we would work backwards, do a parallel investigation to justify having it. And even if it was nothing, it was something out of context, it wasn't criminal activity, well, we had a case open, so we might as well just keep on digging until we find something.
Let's talk about discrimination. Can you read what it says on the slide there?
Discrimination is treating people differently or unfairly based on their characteristics, such as their race, gender, disability, or age.
Pretty interesting, because what I did this morning after watching a video, which I'm going to play you in 1 second, I heard the word discrimination, and it triggered something in my brain to ask the question, like, why in the hell do we keep pushing against the idea of discrimination? You're supposed to be allowed to discriminate. And then I realized that everything out there with the word discrimination in it is not the definition that I ever learned about what discrimination is. It's a new definition that has taken over basically since I left school, I have to imagine. This is the websites that will immediately pop up if you go into Google and type in discrimination. It's the American Psychological Association. What is discrimination? How to cope with it. It asks you about employment discrimination, which is, of course, something you can't do. Healthy People 2030. This is the United States the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, which is an interestingly long, obnoxious government name. And the Amnesty International piece on there, which is actually pretty weird. It says something to the effect of discrimination strikes at the very heart of being a human being. Steve Friend, do you believe that discrimination strikes at the very heart of being a human?
I think that discrimination and exclusivity are what being a productive and happy human being are all about. I was very discriminating when it came to selecting the person that I decided to make other people with, my wife. I only have one. I discriminated against other people. And when it comes to exclusivity, the things that are most important to you are what you keep exclusive. That's why I lock my door. It's not an inclusive place in the friend household. That's why I arm myself, because I don't want people coming in. I keep it exclusive. That's not a sin.
It seems like that would be really reasonable. Again, here's the definition. If you go pull it up from even like the Cambridge Dictionary online, it says the treatment of a person or a particular group differently in a way that is worse than the way that people are usually treated. Discrimination is also a prejudice against people. It's a refusal to give them their rights. And then you find down that it also means, which I think is the primary definition, I'm going to make the argument why, the ability to judge the quality of something based on differences from another, including similar things. Okay? And the reason I would say that's the primary definition, and always has been, is because if you go to the adjective form of it, discriminating, right, which is a participle, is that right? I think it's a participle. It says to know and to act on the differences between good and bad. To discriminate is to make choices that are based on a certain set of criteria that are yours. And we're acting like it's not acceptable to do that. And like I said, even the language has been stolen from us. That is really, really insidious censorship. And I think it's the thing that we need to be aggressive about.
Language is one of the most powerful things that nobody really gives attention to. And I hammer it all the time because the language leads to your mindset, and the ability that the communists have had to take over our language has basically thrown a wrench into any sort of operations to counteract what they're doing. Because people, once you accept their language, you accept the premise to begin with. The best example is gender affirming care. I mean, that is 180 degrees opposite of what those words mean. Mm-hmm. The misuse of the word literally is something that I laugh about, but these are actually important things, because if you accept the language, then you will accept the premise, and then eventually speech is violence, and violence is speech, and hate speech is a real thing. And it's just a process of boiling the frog that we've seen, and now we're kind of pretty far down the path of, and hopefully we can get people back to using the words the way they're meant to mean. Like today, it's Valentine's Day, gents. Be discriminating in your choice of restaurants. I don't think the old lady's going to like Taco Bell.
She doesn't like being called the old lady either, so don't do that either. Let's just advise against that. Toots was the name of my first full-time FBI secretary, supervisor. So here's where this all came from. It came from a woman in Fairfax County talking about something that should be really obvious, that parents have a responsibility to their children, that they are meant to discriminate. And I'm gonna elaborate all the ways that we can discriminate for our children and that we should. She sounds very reasonable. She's obviously like an articulate and well-spoken and intelligent mother. She's like a pretty young lady saying something that we want to agree. And then suddenly like that thing stuck in my craw, because even these people who probably agree with almost everything I would say, they're still captured just a little bit. They are being led around by the nose because this war on language has been so pervasive that it's infiltrated her brain when she speaks in front of people.
I'm Kaylee Weichbrot. I'm a mom of 2 in Fairfax County. This is my oldest. And my husband and I have a difficult decision to make this fall as he is approaching preschool age, and we are faced with the decision of whether or not we are going to put our child in public school system where Fairfax County has decided to move forward with instituting gender studies in elementary school. Despite having done a study group, a focus group in the community to see if parents even wanted this. And when parents said no, the board voted 16-0 and said we're moving forward anyways. This shows clearly that they see parents not as partners, but as an obstacle for their agenda. And I have a really hard time looking at him and going, here, I'm just going to give you over to people who do not want to partner with me in how you're going to be raised. School and education is a huge part of a child's life. And early childhood is supposed to be filled with exploration and creativity and fun, not debating issues that are for adults to handle. These kinds of topics should be introduced sensitively and by parents who are raising their children with their values, not with an ideology passed down from the top. And so this isn't about discrimination. This is about age appropriateness.
I would say it is about discrimination.
Yes. And I mean, it goes down to even when she mentioned partnering with me. I don't want.
Okay, good. So you're hearing the same things I am. I want to hear your reaction because you haven't heard this before, so you're catching it cold. What say you about this woman offering to work with the government?
She's so close. You nail it when you say that she probably overlaps with you ideologically on just about all the big things, right?
I just need to shove her just a little further into the radical space.
She will be making sourdough by the end of the weekend if you had 15
Her husband
minutes.
is about to become a farmer in Fairfax, right?
Homesteading in Fairfax County.
There is no acceptable way for you to look at your child and their education as a partnership with the government. The government is meant to be a slave to your needs. And if it doesn't meet them, then you fire the government and don't let them do it. That's the reason why we take our kids out of government schools. It's the reason why my wife not only slaves over sourdough, but also slaves over the well-being of little kids who we've dedicated our lives to. It's all about that. And that's the only thing it can be about. Nobody else gets a vote in that.
The social compact is not set up to be co-equal. There's a reason then you and I kind of roll our eyes at the we the people element of it. We're at the top. You're subservient.
Right. I, the person, is where it ought to go. And if enough of I, the persons, agree on something, then maybe we, the people, can do something as well. But mostly, you should get the hell out of my way as a government and stop trying to tell me. It's really incredible. They did studies and found out that the parents didn't support it and the board voted 16-0. That board, by the way, has homosexual men with no children on it, and a bunch of other gender ideologically like focused idiots that have no business. That is the most captured place. It's right outside of Washington, D.C., and it is where people who have enough money and also work for the government, and look, she's wearing a cross on the outside of her shirt, and I bet you she is a very, very nice lady. She's probably an awesome neighbor. She's probably sweet and thoughtful, and she's this close to being back in America and being a radical.
The communists realize that they can control the choke points. They can control that school board. 16 of them can control that woman and all of the parents and actually get them to apologize for their positions on things and say things like, we promise, we swear, we're not discriminating. Can we please, pretty please, just partner with you on this? Can you moderate slightly? No, we're in charge. Get the hell out of our way.
It also, it's really obvious to me, like the things that are important to the folks that are Democrats in power right now. Again, they missed the boat. They didn't see the change that happened. On November 6th, something happened in this country last year. Something changed. And I think a lot of people woke up and went like, I'm not alone in thinking that this is complete BS. And I'm not going to comply anymore. And so we're rooting for big balls going into the government and like cutting things out, root, branch, all the way down. And they're still playing this game. Think about the tone deafness of this ridiculous proposition. This is from Ohio. This was a bill that was introduced into the state legislature. I don't think you've heard this yet. This is an attempt to criminalize conception aimed ejaculations of men. I am not exaggerating here.
Do you really believe?
That is not the clip. That is RFK Jr., who probably is, probably not that agree with it. Okay, here we go. Ohio legislature.
Sponsored by Democratic State Representatives Anita Somani, an OBGYN from Dublin, and Tristan Rader of Lakewood.
The whole entire point of this bill is to call out the hypocrisy of particularly the state legislature when they bring forward bills to regulate women's bodies.
Now, there are exceptions to the proposed law, which include sperm donation, contraception, and members of the LGBTQ community. Men face a maximum $10,000 fine after the third offense if they have sex with a woman without the intention of conceiving a child.
Men have the same rights no matter where they go in the country. Women have rights based on where they live.
It just misses the most basic biological facts and leans in towards middle school humor.
Austin Beigel with End Abortion Ohio calls the proposal disrespectful to the pro-life community and a waste of state resources.
They have to review it when they file it. They're going to have to stick a legal team on it, wasting time on that and delaying other bills that are trying to be reviewed as well.
ABC6 asking viewers about the proposal in an online poll. 26% said it's a good idea. 74% telling us it's a waste of time.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. And then the lady goes on to defend it. She's like, you might think it's a waste of time, but we need to waste time because time wasting is what we do.
They want to lean so hard into the 20 side of the 80-20 issues. They have not learned any lessons. And
it's amazing.
You could talk about what law, every law governs your body. So for all the talk about, well, these laws here are only restricting the women. I don't know. We have laws that say that I can get sent to war. I mean, there's laws that say I have to stop at an intersection. Everything controls my body, the same as everybody else. So it's just a effort here to virtue signal. I'm sure they'll get big fundraising numbers out of it. They're state legislators, so I mean, maybe
that's what it's all about. What's funny is there was an actual opponent to Joe Biden who would have actually been decent, and it wasn't Kamala Harris, by the way. It was a guy named Dean Phillips. I had Mark Naughton go out and talk to him at one point in time. If you listen to him speak, he's reasonable, although I don't agree with him, but I could have a conversation with him. And he was willing to talk to like an obviously conservative-leaning reporter asking questions. He went on CNN and shared some stuff that, they just don't understand it. I'm here for it. Like, continue to introduce ejaculation bills. Somebody else said that it should be renamed the no dishonorable discharge bill. Like, it's just so funny.
He could solve all our problems if we didn't devote it to memeing.
Yeah, no, the memes are but that's what makes it fun for us. Okay, so here's a guy just saying sensible. It's like, hey, you guys, you missed the boat, and DOGE is not that crazy. You're crazy.
Unfortunately, Democrats are only focused on one thing right now, Mr. Musk. The fact of the matter, he's quite popular. He has the largest platform in human history, which is, of course, Twitter/X. And I think we're missing the boat as Democrats. And all I'm saying is that sometimes it's better to join them and actually play a role in how the strategy works rather than so pathetically, frankly, try to combat something that clearly is a steamroller, and Democrats are being steamrolled.
Any notes?
I think that when you're in the minority, you don't have any control of the House, the Senate, the White House, or even the Supreme Court. You have a responsibility to your constituents to try to make some sort of progress. Why don't you try to get something in all these losses, get something that you can hang your hat on, and you can be able to say, hey, look, from a position of weakness, I was still able to get X because I was able to compromise in one way or another. But that's not their mandate at this point. You can see the polling, like the id of their side wants them to take the 20 side on every 80-20 issue. And look, that's great. Let's just let the winning continue.
I'm going to throw this up on the screen here for you to look at. This is something that Elon Musk put out. And this is, I think it goes to the point of a lot of the things that have captured people's minds. It's not on accident. The concept of social engineering is something that people should be aware of. But Elon Musk actually tweeted out the following this morning. He said Reuters was literally paid by the federal government for, quote, large-scale social deception. That's literally what it says on the official government documents. Are you comfortable with this use of the word?
I'm comfortable with the
literally?
second usage. Way to go.
Okay. It is literally the actual statement on there. And I've put the description so you guys can read it. Description. Active social engineering defense, also known as ASED, large-scale social deception, paid to Reuters, the Thomson Reuters Special Services LLC, based in McLean, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And that's pretty wild. This is money paid to a quote-unquote news service to do something. What that means specifically, that's another question too, because who knows what the hell that actually even means. But on its face, it is very damning to see this kind of stuff. And so they keep playing this game. The game is like, how much can we push? How much can we change your mind? And the only way for you to fight that is to be discriminating. You have to be.
Take their use of terminology and realize that there actually is inherent power in that. We'll go to something that's close to both of ours. The fact that infanticide and baby murder was evolved and it became we're gonna terminate the pregnancy. Well, that kind of sounds a little bit rough still. The Terminator was a scary movie. We'll abort, right? It never happened. The mission never happened. It was just an abortion. That still kind of sounds too bad. It'll just become reproductive health care. We'll be pro-choice. You can be pro-life. You know what? No, we need to co-opt that language now. You're anti-abortion, and we are for reproductive justice. And as a result of that, you've had millions of people die just from language.
And you've had minds change so that they default, like the logic of it just escapes them. They can't even see it anymore because their brains have been warped by the way that we communicate. Like they've just changed the way the negotiation has been happening. And that's what large-scale social deception looks like. It's like if we can just get you to believe something that is the opposite of true by changing the words and forcing it down your throat. It's not about discrimination, Steve. Except we discriminate every day. We discriminate on what our kids can eat. We discriminate on who they can play with. We discriminate on what houses they can go to. Like, oh no, those parents are smokers and they have like a bunch of like rusty things in their backyard. You're not going to go over there. It's not happening, right? We constantly are making discrimination. You can't play in traffic. Where you're like, why not? Like, there's a big open space to play. It's like, yeah, because you might get mowed down by a vehicle. It is not a good place for you to play. I have decided that I am discriminating against the roadway as a potential place for you to engage in childhood play. We do it all the time, and we don't even think about it. It's totally reasonable to be a discriminating person. In fact, some people used to use it as a compliment.
Discriminating tastes, right? Those were the people that said that the wines had some sort of earthy taste. So they were just making it up as they went along. But the description still holds.
Do you want to hold tight? I'm going to bring on the Susie Moore segment here we did. I want people to understand a little bit more about discriminating because somebody has been in the news that has been making me ask some questions about social engineering, about information operations, and so on. It's a woman named Lindy Lee. So if you want to stick around for a little bit with me.
Send it, man.
All right, let's do that. Okay, my guest is Susie Moore. We're going to be talking about something. I don't want to say I told you so, but folks, there are some things out there in the public space that we should be talking about. And we're going to be talking about Miss Lindy Lee, who seems very interesting at this point. And you wrote a great piece over there, so I'm going to show it up on the screen. Why don't you tell people what you do? Do you have a day job at Red State? Is that your
I do.
normal?
That's my main job. I'm the deputy managing editor there. So that's my full-time gig.
And you guys do great work over there. I've been reading Red State for years, including when I was working in the FBI, and I should have been watching Bad Guys probably.
Sorry we distracted you.
It was useful information. Let's talk about your piece that you just wrote a couple days ago on Miss Lindy Lee.
Yeah, I wrestled with this. I wasn't initially going to do that. But several people that I know had said, because she kept kind of popping up on a lot of different shows, and they're like, "Oh, isn't that the gal that you were telling us about?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I was encouraged to maybe write this, and I thought, well, I don't know. And then she had the big interview with Sean Ryan a couple days ago, maybe last week. And I think she was on with Benny Johnson too. And she's kind of really been prominent in the news. And I thought, you know what I think I'm going to do is just do a straight shooter thing and share my experience, share her own words that I, experienced, and just let people make their own decisions about it.
And so her backstory, or at least what she's saying, is that she was in favor of Biden, but now she's 100% going to call out the Democrat Party. But from what I see, it was like 5 seconds ago, she was actually telling everybody that Trump is a racist and all the things that we've heard from all the people on the political left. And she was a bundler and a fundraiser on the National Finance Committee for the DNC. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I first encountered her. We were both on both guests on a radio show in early October, and I hadn't heard of her before, didn't know anything about her. And I was told, oh, she's with the DNC Finance Committee. I thought, okay, well, we're going to have different views, and fine. And we did. She was fine to me, but she was very, very adamant in her hatred of Trump and Vance, and very effusive in her praise and adoration for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And we were on, a couple of times opposite each other, and it was very clear to me that she was all in gung-ho for the DNC and her candidate until the election. And then
what do you think happened? Just having talked, because I've never spoken to her, but I'll tell you this, just as full disclosure, and my audience probably heard this too. The second that I saw her on Sean Ryan, I reached out to Sean Ryan's producer, and I said, that's what an info op looks like.
So I want to be delicate about this, because I'm somebody who used to be on the left.
Sure.
For the first 30 years of my life. I was a liberal Democrat, not a progressive. And I've since been, I've been on the right now for 20 years. I'm old. But that transition process, it's core to me. I mean, it's an important part of who I am, and it was not an easy process. And I always want to be careful with somebody who's maybe starting to see the light, if you will, and maybe reconsidering their positions. When your worldview is changing that much, it's, it can really shake you up. So I kind of always want to be patient and give a little bit of space to someone who's going through that. But it just seemed like it was so abrupt and so extreme and so conveniently timed around the election that it gave me pause. And so I kind of wanted just to share my own experience.
It's sort of my take in general, and I'll be very curious on your reflection, that people who walk away from one political ideology and lean towards another, they either have a gradual awakening or they have a big walk away moment that we hear Brandon Straka talk about, where like, I had this, this thunderbolt. For my wife, it was all about, because she was raised in Brooklyn, and she had this moment where she realized like what taxes are and how much people pay on them and how unfair that seemed, because her mother was a high income earner. And I was like, are you good with 50% of every dollar she makes goes to either federal or state government? And she went, why doesn't everyone pay the same percentage? Right. And I go, oh, you're a flat tax person. You're the most right-wing person in the room right now. How do you feel about that? And so everybody kind of has these moments of acknowledgement. What I haven't heard from Lindy, and I haven't dug deeply enough into it perhaps, but what is her moment that she's claiming she suddenly realized post November 5th?
It's interesting because when I wrote the article, I had not watched the entire interview with Sean Ryan, and I did go back and make a point to watch the whole thing because I wanted to give it a fair shake. And she talks about it in the interview. She says as early as 2022, she was having misgivings about Joe Biden and his ability to continue and be the candidate in 2024, and was leaking. She, by her own admission, was leaking to Politico, and I think she said MSNBC or NBC, a couple of outlets, about her concerns. So she was concerned enough about it 2 years before the election to leak about it. And yet, up until the point of the election, she was all in for first Biden and then Kamala Harris. And I don't know that she ever really explained what flipped the switch for her. I think it seemed kind of like she kind of glossed over what exactly it was. I think she, had misgivings along the way, but the one thing that I noticed, we talked on this radio show, we talked about a week, maybe a little bit, maybe 5 days before the election. And it was right after, remember when Kamala gave that speech at the Ellipse, and then Joe Biden came along and like stepped on it 5 seconds later and called Trump supporters garbage. So I think it was like the next day. And
This
she
was
was
the
asked,
garbage truck moment.
what?
The garbage truck moment where he
The
got a
garbage
chance to
truck
go.
moment. It spawned the infamous garbage truck
Yeah.
troll. So the next day she's asked about it, and I was expecting her to, have some grand excuse. And she was like, well, yeah, this is kind of a tricky situation. And she even talked about some of Biden's other gaffes. And I thought, that's interesting that there was a different tone and demeanor on her part. So I was like, she knows something. Like, she's seen the internal polling and she knows things are not going to go well on Tuesday, or something is making her kind of temper her attitude about things. But, for her to be leaking to the press 2 years before and yet continuing to raise money, and if you look at her Twitter timeline, she was all in. It's hard to kind of square it all.
I agree. I have this other theory. This is my working theory on people who step away from one political movement. And you said you've done that. I guess I've stepped into a political movement because I was never really a political guy. I served in the military. I didn't really care. I served in the FBI. It really wasn't part of my life. But what I've seen is that there's this strange instinct for people who step out of one movement. Suddenly they quote unquote see the light, or they join another. And they want to be a really loud voice instead of just doing what we used to say, which is kind of like shut up and color and learn what's going on. There's a lot of people that figure this out before you. I've seen Tulsi Gabbard be lifted up in a big way, and people, want to hear what she has to say, and she needs to be in the cabinet. And I went, 5 years ago, she was running for president of the other party. Should we not have that moment where you kind of just sit down and maybe have some humility? What makes people go forward and do that, do you think, as an observer and a kind of astute person in this space?
Well, I mean, one of the things would be if you're trying to make a living in this sphere. So if you're trying to make, living off of media appearances or promoting a political party or candidate, you've got to have your name and your face out there. You've got to be a voice. And so, I mean, that to me is the most obvious explanation. And even if you're sincere in it, you're going to be, out there selling yourself, basically. And even if you're not sincere in it, you're going to be out there selling yourself. And some people are better at that than others.
Sure. I think that's a fair answer. It's difficult to watch this kind of movement in there. And I guess I always advise my audience to be skeptics. Do you have any sense of if we're going to be seeing a lot more of this Lindy Lee? She's obviously made a couple of pretty strong rounds. Does it have staying power in your estimation?
It's hard to say because I don't know how much people are truly warming to her. I got a lot of feedback from that article, more than I even expected. And 95% of it was either, yeah, that was kind of my read too, or I'm so glad that you shared that because I was kind of snowed and now I see it differently. And I had like maybe one or two people that are like, you don't know what you're talking about. So, and I'm no, psychic or anything like that. So my suspicion is that most people that are politically savvy are maybe not going to be, totally taken in by this. Although there is this tendency on the right to want to embrace immediately the second somebody says something that we agree with. It's like so exciting to have somebody on our side. We sometimes run with that a little quicker than we should. But I know that at the end of the interview with Sean Ryan, she was talking about, her discussions with the RNC. I know she was on the finance committee for the Trump inauguration, which I thought was interesting. So she's clearly somebody who, has been a mover and shaker and knows how to get herself out there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see her continue to make the rounds. And my only thing was I wanted people to have the information so that they could make their own assessment.
Oh, what a novel idea. You don't want to just tell people what to think? What's that all about?
No.
Let
them decide.
You do a great job over that at Red State. I want to put your socials on there. Let people you can kind of tell them where to follow you. And you seem to be one of the most balanced voices, I feel like, in that space. I've been reading for a while, and it's helpful to read people that are not trying to spoon feed me their opinion.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that very much. That means a lot to me. I try to keep that balance, and I try to be real with people. I don't want to ever be a situation where someone thinks I'm being phony or inauthentic. The best place for people can find me, aside from redstate.com, obviously, is on, I always want to say Twitter, on X.
I do too.
At SmoozyQ is my nickname there, SMOOSIEQ.
I'll put that in the show description as well. I threw it up on the screen so you guys can see who the proper profile picture is going to align with. That's always a thing. Is it the right account? And it's SmoozyQ. What's with the Packers? How did you become a Packers fan? Are you?
That's all my boyfriend's doing. So I was a Rams fan when they were in St. Louis here, but obviously they left us. And my boyfriend has been a diehard Packers fan since he was a kid. So I just adopted them. They're kind of a fun team to cheer for.
Huh. I just pulled my audio out. That was a really weird move. That was weird. I'm just going to let that ride because that just happens. I missed your entire Packer story, but I'll be able to listen to it in a second when we play this back. Thanks for joining me. I actually really appreciate getting an outside perspective, and thanks for taking a few minutes. And hopefully some people will start following you over there too. And if they're not Red State readers, they will be soon.
They should be. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Kyle.
There it is. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Steve, have you guys did something about Lindy Lee the other day as well? Obviously, folks, that was taped because we couldn't line up schedules. And SmoozyQ is she's a worthwhile get to talk about because she's actually talked to Lindy Lee, who I never have. What was your take the other day on AMRAD?
Well, everything that was articulated in your talk with her. I mean, this was somebody who just came to the party, right? I want to hear when the scales fell away from your eyes. I need to have that aha moment. And Garrett made the point of, like, if you were on the front lines and fighting the Battle of the Bulge and a couple of SS troops walked over and was like, hey, we want to join your side, you would not just hand them a Thompson machine gun. But that's unfortunately what so many people on the cable news watching right, that's their favorite thing to do, is to find the new convert who's just come over and immediately elevate them, particularly if they are a racial minority. That is like the favorite thing of all. And they're just slow your roll. Do, I don't know, one search engine activity like I did and found an NBC News article from July of 2024 that said Hunter Biden has commandeered the White House. So maybe all Lindy Lee did was read some NBC News. And you, for one moment, the woman who was articulating or a surrogate and a fundraiser for Kamala Harris, do you think if Kamala Harris was the president that she would not be in some way operating inside the White House right now? Just take the rosy colored glasses off, put your thinking cap on and say, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying she didn't have the aha moment. I need to hear what it was though, because to me, this looks just like she's going to be on a panel with Nicole Parker on Fox News sometime in the not too distant future.
That is so happening. And for whatever it's worth, I watched her on the Sean Ryan clips without any further information as a lifetime of a discriminating sort of assessment of human beings, as someone who looks at folks and makes judgments based on what I'm going to do about it. And I was like, oh, that lady is disingenuous. What do they always say on the polygraph? It indicates deception, right?
Indicating deception, and then they always pick the one that they hope that you're going to say, oh, yeah, you're right, I lied. But mostly it's just a sham, which is why it's not used in prosecutions.
All right, tell people what you got coming up. Are you guys doing AMRAD tomorrow?
We're hoping to do it. Garrett might be under the weather, so it might be at Real Steve Friend flying solo. Going to be talking about some disruptive forces that we're finding. So maybe disrupt your weekend. Find us over there, rumble.com/AMRADPod. We go 10:30 live, but you can always catch up if you miss it or stream it on iTunes and Spotify.
Steve Friend, thanks for joining me on this Valentine's Day. I have something that just, it made me tickled when I watched it. It was a woman complaining about complimenting men and the things that are actually going on in our brains when that happens. So that will be the palate cleanse. Guys, follow Steve at Real Steve Friend and AMRADPod if you guys want to do that over on Rumble. And you ready for a palate cleanse? Can we break through the noise and just say, women, this is what's going on in men's heads?
They have always wanted that clarity. Let's provide it.
We are now going to provide to you what is going on when you're complimenting us.
The most frustrating thing about men is the fact that they refuse to acknowledge when they are being flirted with. We'll go, you're so handsome. And they just go...
I don't know. That's what goes on in my head. Thanks for joining us over on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. For those of you joining us on X, it's at Kyle Seraphin. We appreciate that. If you want to join the locals community and get our Sunday sit down early, it is KyleSeraphin.com. I'll be talking to Stuart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers founder, in a very long conversation, which will be released tomorrow morning for our audience over there. You guys make sure you've liked the video. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you are watching. And if you want to see the Sunday sit down, it starts at 9 o'clock. It will be streamed tape delayed, obviously, because we taped it over the week. And you'll be able to catch that over on YouTube, and you can catch it on Locals again, and you can also catch it on Rumble, and so on and so forth. So thanks for being part of it. I actually do think about shooting all the time. My wife can confirm this. Whenever we drive by like a property or we see some sort of like rural area, she's always like, what do you think? That's a nice looking house. And I go, yeah, you could shoot on that property. I'm like a child. The way that my son talks about flashlights, I think about shooting on rural properties. That's all I want to do. Anyway, God bless all of you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday if you are available, or Saturday if you guys get there early. And we'll see you on the other side of the weekend if not. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.